Redditors who grew up with shady criminal parents. What did your mom or dad teach you was okay to do that you later learned was illegal or seriously frowned upon? Serious. Quite a few things. Backstory: my bio dad was convicted of murder, got away with another murder through claiming self-defense, no clue if it was truly self-defense, and apparently had a third murder that he never got caught for. He would steal constantly from people to things inside stores. One of my earliest memories is wanting this super cute pink hat. I believe I was around 8. He put it on my head and told me to walk to the car. I remember asking about paying and he said don't worry, just walk. So, little me walks to the outside doors with her heart pounding and then the alarm goes off. I freeze and run back to my dad that was still shopping. First lesson I can remember I learned: you just need to keep walking when those alarms go off. He died a few years back. My brothers and I are decent people. My brother is a great dad, despite who he had as a dad. No, none of us 5 kids have murdered anyone as far as I know. He was an extremely abusive father and husband. I was the only daughter and he sexually, physically, and emotionally abused me from 14 years of age. I ended up in foster care at 14. Have 2 great parents who were my first foster family, a loving bio mom who does her best, and even more siblings from my former foster parents. I have my own struggles, but you'd never know the trauma we went through if you met any of us. My dad did a lot of petty crime as I was growing up because we were lower middle class, hard on money, and he was cheap. Biggest thing that comes to mind was us living near a Christmas tree farm out in the country. There's a little trail that leads through the reforestation in front of my house to the tree farm. So for a few years we stole our Christmas tree from there. We would go one day during the day for a walk and tag one of the trees that we wanted, and then that night we'd come with flashlights, cut it down and drag it through the trail to our house. Dad didn't want to spend $30 on a tree from Home Depot. He also broke into my mom's dad's house when I was young to look for money he apparently kept in a tin can hidden. Never found it, but when I was young my parents told my brother and I that he was looking for my nanny's wedding band. He was abusive. She left in the middle of the night with the kids. He always said he threw away her ring, but she never believed him. Now I'll look back and go WTF. I never thought it was normal growing up, but I also didn't experience these things and go holy crap, my dad's breaking the law. My sister. She's 18 years older than me, so my mom would occasionally leave me with her, sometimes for the day, a couple times for 5 days. 1. Her boyfriend, pimp, coming over, and then strange guys coming and going. I was like, what are they doing in there? 2. Driving to her drug dealer's RV in a trailer park. She left me and my niece outside while she fricked him for dope. Again, what are they doing in there? 3. Waking up to all kinds of weird people in the dining room doing drugs out in the open at 8 AM. 4. Driving severely impaired with 2 kids in the car. 5. She would sleep all day. My niece and I would wake up. She was 5, I was 12, and there would be almost no food in the house, so I had to scrounge. I'm talking potted meat or moldy bread, baked beans for breakfast. It was some of the most fricked up times. I fricking hate that woman to this day. Don't even bother giving me the Ocean addict. Poor her. Be kinder to her. Number. She also let both of her ex-husbands touch my niece. She was so negligent, I'm shocked that we didn't have worse crap happen. My sister is not my biological mother. You all need to take your conspiracy theories somewhere else. There is solid evidence to prove that she is not my mother. Also, we thought this crap was normal. Like weird people in the house, eating moldy food, going to sketchy places. I'm gonna further explain why my sister is 18 years older than me. My mom had her at 18. And then I was a surprise at 36. I look like my mother and my father, and not like my sister or my nibblings. My sister resented my existence from my conception. She was an only child and then I came and fricked it up. My sister didn't become a full-blown drug addict until after my nephew was born 3 years later. There's pictures of my sister and mother together with my 36-year-old mother pregnant and my sister not pregnant in the early 90s. There is a specific photo of my whole family together, including my father who was just my mom's boyfriend at the time. They broke up and she told him to kick sand, and she is pregnant in the photo. Okay, I know baked beans for breakfast is a thing in the UK and but in Texas it's weird af. That's some poverty crap over here. Baked beans are for serving with BBQ and dinner. I hope your niece is okay, or on her way to being okay. Your sister is seriously fricked up. When my relative was physically shaming me at 7 years old, I walked out of my room and to the living room, where my mother and her friends were high off their asses. I said, "Mommy is making me." My mother told me to go back to bed, and sent me back to the room with him. I was punished for being up after bedtime. I thought everyone had an uncountable amount of aunts and uncles, who only ever showed up once in a while for 5 minutes or less, many of who I never saw again. When I was somewhere under 5, I found my babysitter's boyfriend strung out on the couch with tourniquet and needle still in place. I was told he was checking his diabetes. My mother taught me how important it was to lie to the police and CPS, because they were monsters and just wanted to take us away from her for no reason. I learned how to lie without hesitation. My mother always had me wear long sleeves to cover the bruises growing up from the physical abuse of certain relatives and family friends. I remember the moment my innocence was shattered. My mother and I were driving in the middle of the night, blasting Afro Man. Because I got high, I asked my mother if she did drugs, not expecting her to say yes. She said, "I can't lie to you. Do you know what the word discreet means?" I was 8 years old. Friends were never allowed inside the house, and eventually their parents for no reason stopped letting them over. I thought all of these things, and many more, were normal. Quite a shock in middle school when I made friends and saw what their home lives were like. Somehow I always knew it was wrong. Despite knowing it was wrong, sometimes I still went along with it. I mean, getting paid $50 to act as a lookout while mom, along with other relatives, would break into and steal hundreds of dollars in quarters from various washing dryer machines was pretty dang awesome to a 10-year-old. And by $50, I mean $50 in quarters. May as well have been $1 billion, because I always felt like Scrooge McDuck diving into his vault when I got paid. I hated helping to count and package up her portion into those bankrolls though. In case anyone was curious, she had keys for each machine. I won't go into details as to how she obtained copies of the keys, but let's just say it was part genius and part social engineering. All cojones. The method still works to this day, but it's much easier to get caught thanks to technology and really good quality cameras. For her drug-related crimes, I also knew it was wrong and I stayed completely away from it. I was, and still am, terrified when it comes to harsh major drugs, MH, etc. I've seen too much to know that it's not for me and hopefully never will be. Then there was my stepdad. He ran his own con, completely separate from my mom. But again, I knew it was wrong but still sort of went along with it. He would steal various items from his jobs, plural because the dude worked one full-time job at a major retailer, then had his own janitorial business with a good amount of accounts, probably sleeping no more than 5 hours a day, at least 5 days a week, then sell them at the flea market. Going with him to the flea market and helping set up and sell his items was fun. The flea market vendors were their own community of sorts, so we knew all the other vendors in our area and they all treated my brother and I like family. During Christmas, he'd steal tons of toys from his job and my brother and I would get to choose our own presents for Christmas before he sold the rest at the flea market. My brother was a few years younger, so I don't think he was aware of how we got all those toys. I guess you can say they taught us to be okay with doing crimes as long as you never got caught. Neither of them ever got caught, but they did divorce and he did better with his life while she spiraled deeper into a bad path until ultimately dying of drug-related complications. HDUs and other shady dealings with dealers and the likes. My mother and her husband were long-term heroin users. They knew each other since they were teenagers and got married young. My mother met my father while her husband was incarcerated for drug-related offenses. They remained friends and only fell back together when I was maybe 15 or so. My mother was always ill, it felt like she was going to die any minute. She was in agony most of the time she was conscious, and her H-fix seemed to be the only thing to chase the pain away. We later found out that she was riddled with cancer, cervix, uterus and a large portion of her bowel from long ignored problems that developed from my birth. She was incredibly afraid of hospitals, so just never got checked out. From as early as I could remember, I was my mother's primary carer. I would often go to the local payphones on the estate to contact her dealer for a fix for her and even transported her drugs across town on my bike. I was preteen. It didn't feel wrong. I wasn't even aware it was illegal. All I knew is what I was doing would ultimately give my crying, screaming mother a little bit of a break from the pain and agony she was always in. Ironically, she eventually kicked her habit after being forced into hospital for her cancer treatment. Around the early 2000s she was better and healthier than I had ever seen her. We would do gardening together, walk in the woods and so on. Unfortunately, her cancer treatment, radiotherapy, destroyed large portions of her bowel that were unaffected by the cancer and she ended up using a colostomy bag. This, coupled with a lifelong eating disorder, left her dangerously underweight and she was hospitalized in 2005. A doctor administered a Hickman line feeding tube. Now irony, as Hickman was her married name, but he incorrectly inserted it and punctured her lunch. She drowned in her sleep on the 6th of September 2005. And today, 12th of September, is her birthday. Freaking hate this time of year. Holy crap, I'm so sorry for you. So much tragedy in this story and for you growing up. So much crap that went wrong. I'm so scared to say this because I've literally never told anyone, but frick it, here it goes. My stepmom worked in the drug treatment field. How it works is if clients stayed in rehab for a certain amount of time, the person who got them in there would get paid. My stepmom had a good heart at first, she really did. However, 80% of her clients were back on the H before the week was over, so my stepmom would take her throwaway clients, give them drugs while they're in rehab for however long, so by the time my stepmom got paid, they would be back on the streets doing the same crap as usual. She was paying them and dope to stay in rehab. The only reason I know this is because I got snoopy and looked through my stepmom's phone when she let me use it when I needed to call somebody while my phone was broke. I eventually built up the courage to confront her about it, as she said she didn't do this with all of her clients. Some really wanted to get help and she did help them, and that is true. However, there was no justification for it. It escalated into a heated argument that led to me storming out of the house. She would say things such as, "This is how the electricity stays on." However, after a very meaningful talk, and she doesn't work in the drug field anymore, I truly do believe she feels bad, as she should. We decided to not tell anyone else in the family, mainly because my family is full of ex-drug addicts. My stepmom has been clean off H&M for 12 years and it would literally tear our family apart. It feels nice to finally get this off my chest. It has stayed in secrecy since 2015. After reading a lot of these stories, I find comfort knowing that I'm not the only who comes from a fricked up family. So many things. My mother and father grew Spanish tomatoes that never fruited along the back fence. The naive neighbor asked when they'd get a crop, so my mother went to the store and bought some tomatoes, gave them to her, and got praised for how nice her homegrown tomatoes tasted compared to store-bought ones. Later there was a jar of greenish adult biscuits we weren't allowed to touch. When my parents split up, Mum got with our stepfather, who would get us to help him steal the emblems off of cars at night, but only Fords. The aim of the game was to collect as many as possible and not get caught. Same man found out we never had a pet dog and got us one. Turns out he stole it. The dog jumped the fence one day a few weeks later and ran home. We moved house a lot, which we were told was because our biological father was stalking us. Turns out our stepfather was wanted for some serious crimes and would rent houses under a pseudonym. We weren't allowed in the sheds because it was his office space. Got into one when they split up and found a bunch of drug paraphernalia and sandwich bags with money. Our stepfather got us a laptop for school that clearly belonged to someone else. I had more biker uncles than biological uncles. To be fair, most of them were lovely. That's it off the top of my head. I remember when I was around 6 or 7 years old, my mother, father, 1-year-old brother, and myself was riding in a brown car that my mother was driving. As she turned a corner in a residential neighborhood, the power steering went out and we ran into a parked car in front of a home. A man and woman ran out screaming that they were calling the police. All of a sudden, my dad grabs me and starts running full speed down the street, throws me over a fence in someone's yard, jumps over himself, and we both laid down. A few minutes later, police cars with fire searchlights start circling the neighborhood. The officer gets on the bullhorn calling his name and saying he is trash for dragging his 6-year-old daughter with him while he ran. Apparently he had serious warrants, for what I have no clue. I just remember being so happy and proud of myself for keeping up. I kept asking, did I do good, Daddy? He disappeared when I was 8 years old, never to be seen again. I heard he died a couple years back in my early 30s. That's really tragic and sad. I hope you've had better role models since. My entire childhood my parents kept pounds of weed and stacks of money hidden. I started picking off some pretty sizable chunks at about 12 years old for consumption and my own little side hustle. Years later I found out my dad suspected this, but my mom told him he was crazy so he never did anything about it. I remember once when I was probably 9 or 10, late 80s, my mom snatching my kid sister and I up early in the morning and just the three of us darting to my uncle's house. I found out later that she got a call the police were coming. My dad blew it off and slept in. She taped $20K worth of bills to her body and fled with us. In a panic she was dropping stacks on the way into my uncle's house. He started yelling at her, "Goddammit Maria, you're dropping money everywhere." My uncle yelling is all I remember. I got the details decades later. Towards the end of my teenage years they expanded their offerings to include crack and starting using it. The whole decades-long operation fell apart. They separated, started behaving like crazy crackheads. Dad got locked up for a few years where he cleaned up. Mom ended up homeless for a while. We put her in a state-funded women's home where she cleaned up. Both live very modest but normal lives now. My sister has a master's degree in ed and is a high school guidance counselor. I landed in a high-paying occupation and run multiple profitable businesses on the side, all legal. We both invest in real estate. I often think our successes are due to the psychotic upbringing we had. My dad is not a criminal, but he loves free stuff. I have two amazingly hilarious memories of when this almost got him into trouble when I was a kid. 1. When I was about 12 he took me and a couple of friends to a local amusement park. This park has picnic pavilion areas and on weekends in the summer it's common for there to be work picnics there. Around lunchtime my dad takes us to look for a work picnic so we can get free food. We find one, get in line, and start eating. The spread was really solid. Catered burgers, hot dogs, potato salad, ice cream, etc. I'm halfway through my burger and I realize the sign hanging in the pavilion is for the local Fraternal Order of Police. Yep, we were crashing at the local city police department's family summer picnic. I tell my dad and he plays it cool. A couple of people try to strike up conversations with him and each time he either stuffs his face with food and attempts to communicate while chewing with a full mouth, which causes the person to walk away. Or he says hi then pretends to know someone on the other side of the picnic and says, "Excuse me, I'll be right back. I wanna go say hi to insert Bull's made up name," to see how his mother's surgery went. We were there for a solid 45 minutes to an hour and ate all that we could. 20 years later and one of my friends who was there with us still texts me randomly to reminisce about how ridiculous that experience was. 2. Local MLB baseball team did a free ticket night for cancer survivors for cancer awareness. My dad's never had cancer, but damn it does he love baseball and free stuff. So he gets tickets for free and takes me to the game. I had a good time and he was able to BS his way through conversations with other cancer survivors who didn't expect anything was up. After all, what type of lowlife lies about being a cancer survivor to get free baseball tickets? Answer: my dad. While leaving the stadium, a cable news team stops my dad to ask him his story about overcoming his cancer diagnosis. I crap you not, this actually happened. The camera is pointed in his face and my dad blanks. Completely blanks. He mumbles a bit. Reporter: tell me about overcoming your cancer diagnosis, sir. Dad: UHH. I got over it. Reporter: where was your cancer located? Dad: my body. Reporter: which part? Dad: UHH. My stomach. Reporter: how long have you been in remission for? Dad: UHH. Like 2 weeks. Years. 2 years. They took my stomach out 2 years ago. Reporter: looking confused as heck. That's remarkable, sir. You're an inspiration and I wish you all the best. This interview made the 11 o'clock news that night. Everyone we knew saw it. Everyone I knew in the entire world saw me, grinning like an idiot, while my dad lied about having his stomach removed. Also he could go to a baseball game without having to pay for tickets. While my dad was never a criminal unless you count the one time he was wanted all over the US because he forgot to convert CAD into USD when paying a ticket. Warrant expired I think on terms he had been a good boy since it, so he tells me. He had fun in his past. A few things he taught me were, if you ever get in a conflict, try to walk away. If you can't, run. If you still are unable to get away, turn around and beat them until they go down. Tell them to stay down, and if they try to get up, beat them down again. Repeat as necessary. Allowed to drink and do drugs all I wanted on the condition I ask him. He would find me clean stuff. Taught me that if I ever got grabbed, shove my fingers into a guy's eyes and pop them like grapes. Taught me how to street fight. The one who stands up and walks away wins. Allowed to drink and do drugs all I wanted on the condition I ask him. He would find me clean stuff. Haha. I remember the drugs talk. If you wanna try drugs, come see me first. Your dumbass friends are gonna get you burned. Thanks dad. After being around you, I teetotaled to 25 and 20 years later I still don't care much for any of it. Especially liquor. Good job. My dad is pretty much known for stealing stuff from restaurants. Taking a souvenir. He would sometimes make little me steal things like ice skates that we hired, plates from restaurants etc. I needed a few bikes in my life and every time he got me one it was stolen. I stopped asking when he gave me one with child seats, front and back. He would always drive drunk when I was with him in the weekends. This drunk drive was from the bar to home, cause that's where he took me, 10 at the time, and my sister, 7 at the time. He even got us drunk. One bottle of booze, around this age a few times. Whenever he asked me if I needed anything he would find a guy who has this, which basically means someone who for a low price sells stolen crap. When he was in fights with his GF he'd just insult her, curse and threaten her. Me and my sister would just sit there, most times really scared because of all the screaming. His GF was also very manipulative towards us. I luckily was mostly raised by my mom and myself. Stealing has been ok for me for way too long. Never really received that moral compass. Drinking and driving always felt wrong and I don't drink that much. Only when I go out like once a month. I hated the fighting so I try to avoid that as much as possible. But I think I turned out alright. Well, they acted like M was okay and beating women was acceptable. I didn't realize how fricked up my family was until I was 18 and I met a guy whose family would have family night twice a week. Their kids could bring their friends, it was super chill. They'd do a big meal and hang out one of those nights, and the other night would alternate like it might be music night. Bring instruments and jam. One week and the next week you're playing Risk or some other type of board games, chess, dominoes, whatever. I remember thinking when's domestic violence night I can't count on all my fingers and toes how many times I had to call 911. As a child, I had to call 911 so much that 2 of those times my friend's mom answered, who was a 911 dispatch. Pretty embarrassing. Yeah, Mrs. Cook, he's beating her up again. But I always knew I'd never tolerate any of those behaviors from myself when I grew up. I never once took any of those hardcore drugs they'd do. I never once hit a woman. I never even got the urge to. I don't even understand that crap at all. I just walk away in conflict. I take a walk and when I get back it's usually hugs followed by a calmer conversation where a resolution is reached. Growing up that way, I just played the opposite game. Okay, I'm definitely not gonna do that. I'm certainly not gonna be like that. It really wasn't hard to break the cycle. It never looked appealing to begin with. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.